Welcome to the Practice Impossible podcast with your host, Coach JPMD. And if you haven't had a chance, leave a review, leave a comment, tell us what you think about the podcast, because that's what helps us get the word out. And without that, it's much more difficult for those physicians that are needing to understand how to decrease their stress and increase their revenues to do so. So this week, we have a special guest, Zach Elliot, good friend of mine who I saw at school, at our kid's school. And it was interesting because he asked me about concierge medicine and concierge practices because he had such a great experience. And he was actually gifted that membership and wanted to share that experience with our audience. And that's something that we don't get too often, having patients share their experiences. So I thought it'd be a great episode. And so here we go.
And so we have all the parts, but it's not meaningful. And that's a symptom of the Enlightenment. It's a symptom of an over-dependence on the left brain and not seeing from that right brain kind of a broadly vigilant, imaginative perspective. And so I think you sit down with a doctor and a pastor and a politician, that's not a joke.
Welcome, Zach Elliot, to the Practice Impossible podcast. Zach, welcome to the home.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming by. I know you're busy. Although I have to say that this is probably the one way I can reel you into the house without getting Cammie to yell and scream at you, huh?
This is great. Well, and to be here in your studio, it's so cool. This is great. So, no, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, you're part of that inspiration too, right? Because you did this way before me, and you're continuing to do it. You have your own podcast. You're a pastor. You're an author. You're a coach. And you helped us pre and post wedding. So, you've been an amazing friend and wise counsel. And you're here for a particular reason as well. And that is, we saw each other, when was it, a couple weeks ago?
I think so, yeah.
At our kid's school. So your daughters go to the same school as my son at St. John's. And you said you had an aha moment. You said, Jude, why don't you tell the story?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about it actually for a couple weeks, and we hadn't run into each other, but I was thinking about you because I've had such a good experience with Concierge Medical, and there's some changes coming just personally in my relationship in that world. But for 3 years, I have enjoyed a world in medicine that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I kept thinking about you, and I thought, man, if I had access to you, Dr. Pierre, in that kind of a relationship, it would be,
it can be game changing.
Yeah,
especially during the COVID. So we're going to get to that because part of the reason why we have season 2 is to help physicians understand how to practice free of corporate medicine, how to practice the way they want to practice. And I think a lot of physicians are seeing the light, especially through the COVID experience. And physicians are stressed, people are stressed. And you bring a different perspective on life and life in beauty. And with the work that you're doing at your organization, VIVO.
Yeah. Everything starts up, right? There's transcendence. And I think everybody's longing for that, but we all have an upward orientation. And that's great, but it's only great if it becomes embodied and incarnational. And so we say whatever's up has to be birthed in, and that's good, but life is relational, so it has to transform relationship. And if it's not that flow, then it's good, but it's missing something. So that's why we say up and in and out.
Yeah. And so in your book, you mentioned, and you've talked about it in different sermons and different talks that I've heard you speak about, and that's the allegory of the cave. And what I find very fascinating is how I feel like some of us have been in that cave as physicians, as providers, especially in this crazy COVID world that we were in, and we're probably still in a little bit. Physicians were lost. We were in a cave. We were darkened by the lack of noise or noise around us. And it was until a couple of physicians out there shed that light. And, we spoke about this a lot around illness and shots and things. And I found myself not feeling comfortable. I was very uneasy. And I think I became very uneasy when I called a hospital administrator at our local hospital, and I said, hey, I've been hearing rumblings of the need for vitamin D in our hospitalized patients because those patients are nursing home patients. They have not been exposed to sun. Can we give vitamin D in the hospital? Can I order that vitamin C? Yeah, I think so. Like, what do you mean you think so? Yeah, I think so if it's on formulary. So I call the pharmacist. Yes, some of them we don't have, but you can have the family bring in those vitamins for the patients and you can give them. I said, the same families that can't go to the hospital because of COVID restrictions. So from that point on, I'm like, there's something going on.
Mm.
And so I know that there are physicians that are out there that are looking to do other things. And before we get into the concierge medicine and your experience with that, what are the things that you see as in parallels when you're, because I've always had this question for you, as a pastor's pastor, and I understand that you counsel pastors.
Yeah.
Do you see any parallels to what's going on in the physician world, or the medical world?
Yeah. Well, I love you starting with the cave or taking us back to the cave and Plato's allegory of the cave, because it's a great framework for us to think about a reality that can exist that is not the truth. And it's a part, but it's not the whole. And I think all of us, no matter what discipline, whether it's medicine or theology or politics, are experiencing something that we know is dissonant. It's off. It's part but not whole, and that's a pretty good way to frame it. I don't know if you're familiar with Ian McGilchrist's work, neurologist, just a brilliant guy. He wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary and The Matter with Things, which is a 2-part series, and he looks from a neurological perspective at the right brain versus left brain, and just the fact that Western culture post-Enlightenment has been increasingly kind of dominated by a left brain perspective, parts not whole, right? And so there's this famous way he unpacks it, thinking about like a body, or that it gets unpacked in this conversation around like a body. You can do an autopsy and understand every part of the body, but you can memorize that, particularize it, talk about it, but you're not talking about Jude. You're not talking about Zach. And I think that's what a lot of doctors, a lot of pastors experience that might be a parallel. I write about it in my book saying we get it, but we don't have it, right? I can give you theological answers. I can talk about systematic theology, but it's almost become particularized to the point that it's disenchanted. It's lost its meaning. And so we have all the parts, but it's not meaningful. And that's a symptom of the Enlightenment. It's a symptom of an over-dependence on the left brain and not seeing from that right brain kind of a broadly vigilant, imaginative perspective. And so I think you sit down with a doctor and a pastor and a politician, that's not a joke, but could be a good joke, but you sit down with all of us, especially on a day like today, but you sit down with all of us and we all feel something is off. We've gotten really great at particular parts and we're masters at it, but we've lost something of the whole. And that's why we got into it. That's why we wanted to be a pastor. That's why we wanted to be a doctor. And so I think all of us are trying to find our way back to a meaningful engagement in our work that allows us to touch the parts, but in union with the whole, and not just be relegated to, data and part. So there might be some overlap there in a lived experience where I think pastors are feeling this same thing. And a lot of pastors are quitting. A lot of pastors are saying, I've lost, it's not meaningful anymore. And I've lost contact with the thing that first enchanted me and brought me into this work. And so I think we've talked about that, physician suicide, burnout rates, all of those things. I think that's all shared.
So when they're leaving, are they saying that they can't find their way back to that enchantment, or that what is their reasoning for not trying to find the way back?
Yeah, there's a cultural element to it too. Just, we're in a kind of a post-secular age where it's like post-Nietzsche saying God is dead. That lasted for a while, where their work became kind of irrelevant because we just all decided God didn't exist. And if you're in the God business, then you kind of feel like you don't exist, which it's hard to go to work every day in that. But I think as that crumbles and people have a growing sense of spiritual hunger, there's a desire to stay, but we've built systems, very much like medicine, the church has built systems that kind of keep you from doing the meaningful parts of your work and ask you to do things that are really not the work that you felt called to. And so again, that's shared in medicine, I think, too. The conversations we've had, you put a pastor in a role and burden them with administrative tasks and executive tasks and just keep piling on, and trying to keep pace with growing something, scaling something, all those demands. And you put those on somebody who is legitimately called to like spiritual formation and to talk about this other thing. They're not going to last long in that environment.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of dovetails into the personality of that doctor, or that temperament of the doctor or the pastor. Because if you put them in a situation where they're not thriving, or they're not able to thrive based on their profile, because you've profiled me, and we've spoken, you've counseled us on that, and I didn't understand many of the profile tests that were out there, and I actually did some research, and or at least tried to do some research on whether or not there were medical specialties that were, I don't want to say conducive, or were better suited for physicians and personalities, and how they could merge together. And there wasn't much. I see here, Health Grades actually had a small research that stated that anesthesiologists were more introverted in sensing, cardiologists were more intuitive, internists like myself were more intuitive in judging. So what is your take on that? Have you had any or seen any research on the pastoral side that looked at the personality types of pastors and what roles they should be in?
Yeah. No, there's probably, I don't know if there's more work done for pastors, but there's been some good work done on temperament and ministry and vocational ministry. But those differences that you called out, those are all from the MBTI, the Jungian-based Myers-Briggs system. And again, Jungian-based introversion, extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. Those seem to be, again, those are not necessarily subjective. And so you get DISC, you get Strength Finder, there's all Enneagram. There's a broad brush of temperament sorters. The MBTI, the Jungian-based, is a little more data-driven, if you want to say it that way. Yeah, and the reality that we can look at introversion, extroversion. You think about that like an anesthesiologist as an introvert. I hope so. Maybe you've spent your whole life studying, and you're comfortable studying and looking at the current data, and that you're comfortable in there. That intuitive gift, if you open me up, or you're dealing with the whole of my body, that intuition over time, I think that those could be really powerful indicators in the spiritual vocation, in pastoral care. You think about putting an deeply introverted person who's maybe a thinker, who's well suited to be a teaching pastor, and they thrive and flourish, just nose in a book, thousands of years of church history, studying doctrine, that brings them so much joy. And then to get up and unpack that, they love doing that. But to ask that person to go sit down with a grieving family and make sense of death in the moment, that's not where they're at their best. And so we've asked that of pastors for a long time. We've said, we need you to be great at, exegetical preaching, and we need you to be looking at Greek and looking at Hebrew, nose in a book, hours of study. And then at the drop of a hat, we need you to be deeply empathetic and intuitive and extroverted to sit with this family for hours on end, and then be able to meet new people and welcome them in from the sidewalk and the street. That's a big ask. And so I think that even in Ephesians, there's a great text in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, to a church in Ephesus, this particular church. He said he gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be shepherds and teachers. And that archetype is pretty interesting. There's been some good work looking at temperament and those giftings to say that apostolic gifting is really an entrepreneurial gifting. It's the people who are thinking about pushing the boundary, moving to new contexts, always missional, kind of orienting. They're good for a moment, and then they want to pioneer something. Mm-hmm. Prophetic types, being able to read the landscape and apply truth or wisdom into a particular moment, kind of keep the vertical and horizontal alignment of something. Evangelists, being the people who are just outward facing, welcoming people in. And then you've got shepherds who are caring for people and sitting with people, and the teachers who are really holding on and passing down wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Paul's letter, he said, that's 5 different giftings, and you need those working as a team. And I think medicine, if we think like that, I'd love to see more data. I think doctors may feel a lot of freedom to practice free.
Yeah, and also to get the resources that they need to supplement what they are not good at. I think what we're doing is telling physicians, you're going to be an ER doc, you're going to be able to, do this, X, Y, Z, and then when a patient dies or family member dies, you have to go tell the families. They may not be equipped to deal with that. And as you talk about that, I'm like thinking, how much stress are we adding to their lives?
Well, think about a team environment where you have a chaplain, you have a doctor, you have a social worker, you have, a team approach to medicine where that doctor is a part of a team. But we want that doctor to do it practicing their specific craft and being excellent at it, and not asking them to then have to apply that across this other spectrum of things. That's a huge ask of people. And it is temperament driven, gifting driven, expertise, training and experience, all that.
Yeah. So then how do you tell a patient that doctor's not good at that? Because they're expecting you as a patient, I would think,
be good at everything.
To be good at it, you need to be the God. You are the God, quote unquote. So that's interesting. Very interesting.
I don't know if we can segue or you want to segue to concierge medical, but that's a great look. And maybe culture is changing, because I know I might be a great friend. I'm a great audience member to your podcast because I love and appreciate what you all do and the practice of medicine. And I think as somebody who relies on that great care, I want you to be great at helping me understand what I need most. And so if you say, well, I'm going to invite the chaplain to have this conversation. Yeah. I'm going to invite this person in. What you have is my trust. And that there's a lot that goes into building that trust with with a patient. I want that. I want to trust someone. After that, if you point me in a direction and say, hey, I want you to work with so-and-so because they've got particular expertise, I'm good.
Yeah, so that's where consultants come on board.
There you
go.
go.
As a concierge physician, physicians need to understand where their limit of knowledge is, where their limit of expertise is, and then farm that out or consult that out to other specialists. So what has been your experience with concierge medicine? Because that's really one of the things that brought you here, and I wanted to hear what your experience is, because we want physicians to also understand what it's like on the patient side. What are you looking for in a physician?
Yeah. Well, it's great. We strike what I just said. I want you to be God and fix everything. No, we want a physician that cares about us and actually is a person. Like, they care about us as a person. And it may sound super sappy, but I write poetry and talk about spiritual things, so I'm going to say it. I want my doctor to care about my whole being, biopsychosocial, spiritual self. And that's why being treated as a person and not a number, that matters. And that's what attracted me to concierge medicine. And again, no critique against doctors. I just recognized the system as it exists means I have to be a number. That doctor can't get to know me as a person. They just don't have time. And so first and foremost, I want to be known by my doctor as a person. I want him to know what I struggle with, what I'm afraid of, what I'm concerned about, what my goals are, my stage of life. I've got 4 kids and a wife, and I want their care to be informed by who I am as a being. And that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, but they have to be able to afford being able to spend time to get to know you. So as a consumer, what are you looking for? What's your price point? Like, what's the value? How much is it value? How much do you value that care? Are your friends paying for this type of care? Do you know anyone else doing it? Or what's your experience with the pricing model or the value of it?
Yeah, it's a challenge, obviously, because healthcare right now, because we're in a transit, it feels like, at least on my side of things, it feels like there's a transition taking place. And so we're having to buy things. It's kind of like paying for private school. Like you may have a kid who's going to benefit from access to a certain type of environment educationally. And so you're paying taxes to fund great public school systems. And at the same time, you have a kid who you say, I'd love to get them into this program so they have access to this. So I'm kind of paying double. And right now it feels like that with concierge medicine, that you still have to have health care. You still are paying your health insurance premiums. You're still paying for all that. You're still paying for the pharmacy. You're still paying for your specialists. And on top of that now, I'm paying, a few $1,000s a year to have access to really personalized care from my physician, access and responsiveness, which is amazing. Add that to the list, right? To be able to email and communicate with my doctor's office, and it's not even the doctor, but just the team. That responsiveness that's personalized, it's informed. That's worth several $1,000s to me as a person on top of healthcare premiums and all the other healthcare costs we're paying. So the challenge with concierge medicine is keeping that ratio, right? I think my concierge doctor says they have a 300 person cap. So I'm one of 300 under my doctor's care. And I don't know how that stacks up, but that's a
a very small pool.
Yeah. Small. And so how does that break down? I know that if you're paying $3,000 to $5,000 for that concierge service, that's where I was comfortable in that ballpark. That keeps going up. In fact, you and I were talking just a bit ago that we just got a letter that our service is going to go dramatically higher than that. Wow. And so for my family, because I'm not in a profession that, there's a cap income-wise in my business, and we may get priced out of this particular concierge doctor, but I'll be looking for another concierge doctor in that price point because, again, personalized care, responsiveness and access, that ability to come to you and know that I'm going to be able to ask questions, that's worth that $3,000 to $5,000 price point. And I'm kind of a middle class. We're a family who is privileged, well provided for, but we're not the wealthy elite of our culture. I think that price point from my peers is consistent. People are tired of not having that responsiveness and personalized care, and they're willing to pay in that ballpark for it.
And when you see that physician, what is their demeanor? How do they look? Are they late? Are they disheveled? Or
no? I mean, you're getting again, and it sounds you put a number like $3,000 to $5,000 on the table on top of all your other healthcare costs, and you go, that's a real number, right? And that's not for your family. That's for you. And if your wife is doing that, that's for her too. So those numbers do add up. And so there is a level of expectation. I walk into the office, it's beautifully clean. The experiential economy is beautiful and it's inspiring, and it inspires confidence and peace when I walk into that office. And my doctor is really well educated. They're well trained. They're probably the best and the brightest in their group. And they've chosen to do this because they really care about patients. And so that's what comes through. There's a level of their care where they get down and they look you in the eye, and you know that they love their job. They're there not because they have to be there, but because that they love to practice medicine and they're ready to do it.
Yeah, those are some powerful words. And I think what you're doing is helping to inspire physicians to understand that they don't have to do what they are doing. They don't have to live in that cave. Because if you are able to practice well and elicit that trust from your patients, which I think most physicians can do, it can be very lucrative. But more than lucrative, it can decrease your stress, decrease your burnout, decrease hopefully suicide rates, because I think a lot of the stress that we see in our profession is because of that push, trying to make more money, and for what?
Yeah.
Really. So
when there's no specialized equipment in the office too. I mean, there's EKGs. So if I go into a regular office visit and I feel I just feel a little weird, there's EKGs, in-body machines. There's access to really good equipment, but it's not like you can go in and just pop in for an MRI. You still have healthcare. You're still getting referred out to specialists. So I imagine, what I'm paying for is that person. And that person's care. Yeah. And it's worth it.
So there's no when you say no specialized machine, so there's no X-ray machine on site. There's
not at my particular office. I still use our local imaging group, and we still pay for that with our healthcare premiums. So the concierge medical is really quarterbacking our care. It's really somebody who's our partner in care. And again, I do hope it's inspiring to your audience, because I'm a fan. Like, your craft and your care, it matters so much. And I can just tell you in the little stuff, right? I'm the people who are at home talking to my wife about, hey, there's a bump here or a lump here, or my blood work shows this, and we're thinking about our kids and raising kids. And those are serious conversations. And to know that we have a partner who cares about us and is willing to be responsive to us, and knows that on a Friday at 3:30 p.m., when that test result comes back, for you to personally text me and say, hey, I got your results and I want to talk to you about it. Give me a quick call.
Yeah.
Will you pay $4,000 or $5,000 for that? 100%. Yes, please. Right. And it's trust and it's personalized care.
And I think for those that feel that it might be a lot, I think if you're a younger person with not as many medical problems, you have an HSA. I have an HSA plan.
Yep.
So my HSA, I fund, I have 5 kids now, to the max. And if I wanted to, I could use part of that HSA monies to cover a concierge medical doctor, which is a medical cost that wouldn't come out of my pocket. It'd be pre-tax. And so definitely, I think if you value the care that you're getting, you value the services, I think, like you said, 3 to 5 may not be that much for you. Some may argue that it's pricing people out that can't afford it. But I think our whole medical profession is doing that. I don't think it's the concierge medical doctors. I don't know how you feel about that, but there's some people who may not be able to afford it, and they say, well, that's only for the rich. But
well, I'm with you, because access to healthcare is deeply important. You talk about, like, was it a human right? Well, I don't know how to talk about that. I know from a pastoral side, from a theological perspective, the dignity of persons mattered. And you'll get me super excited. I love when the church was building and funding hospitals.
Yeah.
I love that. Do I wish that our community of faith, and I'm talking specifically to the congregations that I have relationship with in a Christian context, we are responsible to make sure that there is incredible care for every person, and every person has access to that. I love that vision. Yeah. And we should be cutting checks for that purpose. So you need a couple things. You need a community of people who believe and see that vision, participating with their treasure. Mm-hmm. And you need churches and institutions, religious organizations, I think, that as they did in certain times, where they see the value of the good and the true and the beautiful, and they say, let's build a great hospital and let's make it possible for everyone. It's beautiful and aspirational. I would put an and if there's a population of people who says, I have the resource to partner with a doctor because I do appreciate that personalized care and I can do that, then awesome. That relieves a burden from this other part of the system, and it allows those folks to have access in this way. That's great. Yeah. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and. And I think that it's a way, I think there will be a way forward there where there's you talk about, I have a friend who writes music, and he says the best advice he was given is, if you write for one, you'll reach thousands. If you write for thousands, you won't reach anybody. And I think in concierge medical, there's a small group of people right now who really do have particular concerns about their health, and they value that relationship with their doctor. And that niche or sub-niche is going to respond to your invitation to care for them. Yeah. That's great. And then again, let's keep having a conversation about a broader access that brings the best medical care, so that anybody, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, anything, can walk in and say, I need care, and they get excellent care. Yeah. It's a both and.
And it brings up in my mind the idea of how can we support that vision of those that are looking to do concierge medicine by allowing physicians to also see those patients who can't afford care, see them for free, see them at a discounted rate. But do you know that our laws prohibit that?
That's like, I want to say criminal. I don't.
So if I accept Medicare, if I accept a government insurance, I have to charge anyone that comes into my office that Medicare rate. Otherwise, I could be seen as what is called favoritism, or I forgot the term for it.
Sure.
But you can't undercharge that person, even though I would love to see families who can't afford insurances, and some of them come to me. My parent, so-and-so doesn't have insurance, I can't afford your care, so we have to go to the emergency room. What about the cost there?
Yeah, see, that's the part where I think the broad community gets frustrated, because we go, it feels, and it may not be accurate, but it feels like those laws are made by people who can call their friends who are doctors, and their friends who are doctors will be like, come on by, I'll just see you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they have that access, and they're winking a nod, handshake, getting seen by people. Oh, come on by, I'll run, I'll take a look. Hey, would you take a look at my MRI? Sure, send it to me.
Absolutely.
That's happening all the time by the people making the laws that say you can't do that for people. It just feels like that. I don't have any data to back that up.
Well, maybe we should get the data. I'll get the data.
Yeah.
I'm a data guy, so.
Go nuts. Left brain till it blows apart.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on the Practice Possible podcast. It's been a great conversation. I'd love to have you again. There's so much we can talk about and just hang out and maybe chill on the dock somewhere when I get a dock. Do some fishing back there. So, hey, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much. Thanks for what you do. And I love Practice Impossible, like, to your audience. Before you cut me off with like the Oscars, I'm going to say thank you to all the people who have invested a lot to be able to care for us. Like, it does matter. And for those of us who really value the work of doctors, it's amazing that you're practicing and having conversations like this to be excellent at your craft, because we need you. So thanks.
Thank you.